Hello everyone and welcome back to Millicraft. In today's episode, we are going to be completing our plant series, our final episode of the Plants of Minecraft of 1.21.7, and see what we have left. And as you can see behind me, there's quite a bit, so let's get started. In the world of Minecraft 1.21.7, we have so many different plant types that we have yet to touch on. We have already gone over flowers in this series, we've gone over trees, we've gone over growable and edible plants, but what we didn't do is go over some of the more unique and more decorative plants. Some of them have, purposes, and some of them don't have anything but decorative purposes at all. So let's begin in the row of grass. This is probably the biome you're going to spawn in. You might spawn in our lovely, like a desert, or you might spawn in somewhere with like a taiga or something, but most of the time you're going to spawn into a grass biome. And I'm going to pull up these guys here. We want to look at how these plants function in Minecraft. So let's start with our grass block. Grass block is technically a plant. You need silk touch to move a block with grass on it. You can use bone meal to get grass and other things, such as our ferns. You can use that grass and grow it taller. You can trim that grass down with a pair of shears, not silk touch, but shears, in order to get short grass. Now, tall grass is a block. It is technically a gettable block within Minecraft. However, you cannot do it naturally. You have to find it in a chest from a villager. And they're usually found in like the savanna villages. So it is a very rare block in the game because you do have to find it in a chest. Same thing with a fern. Ferns grow in your taigas, they grow in the tropical regions, and they will show up when you bone meal grass in those regions, but they can also be too tall ferns, so you can bone meal them. However, when you break them down, you just get two ferns. You don't actually get a tall fern. Now, the tall ferns are findable, again, in a village, in a taiga village specifically. In those chests, you can find a too tall fern. Probably actually a little rarer than the too tall grass, but they are findable. Now, there's a brand new block that we have in Minecraft now, and that is the bush. The bush block can be harvested not with your hands. You can't do it with your hands. But what you can do with a bush block is you can shear it, just like you can with the other grass and fern blocks. And unlike these two, where you have to grow them to make them taller, to get more of them, to shear them, if I try to bone meal, I'm not going to be able to bone meal this particular block because of the fact that it doesn't have anywhere to grow. So if I were to break this apart and then bone meal it, another bush is going to spring up in another available spot. So you are going to have to be able to shear it, and then you'd have to bone meal it again, and then shear, and then bone meal, etc. Now you can make kind of a semi-fun little farm with this by kind of building like a large platform, but unfortunately it's not washable, so you would have to do some kind of shear technique or something. So I have seen farms built where they have like one block and then a dispenser or something shears these. So they are reproducible. Now the last thing in our green category I am considering is vines. And vines will grow on their own. You cannot bone meal them, so I'm double clicking them. They cannot be bone mealed. However, they can be harvested with a pair of shears, which unfortunately I am not in survival. So if we were to do this, we can get our vines right there. And the vines are found in mangrove swamps and regular swamps, in jungle biomes. You can grow them just about anywhere that there's some grow space, and you can replicate them as much as you want by letting them grow and then shearing them and adding them to other flat surfaces. The next plant life I'm considering, even though this isn't really a plant, it's just a block, is Podzol. Podzol is a very beneficial kind of growing surface. You can plant all sorts of things in it that you can on grass, but you can also use it to plant on mushrooms, just like mycelium. But it's a lot less rare than mycelium, and it has a very nice texture. Now, if you were to bone meal this, unfortunately, nothing's gonna happen. So if you want to put grass or ferns or bushes or something on this block, you will have to shear them from another space first and then place them on the podzol. Now, why did I put this little dried grass here on the podzol? They are found in deserts technically, but I wanted to have this here because it just looks rather good. And then you're also going to find these dead bushes. So there's our bush and dead bushes. This cannot be replicated, but it must be sheared to be able to get it. And the same with these little dry grasses. The dry grasses have a short variety and a tall variety. And just like with the bushes, you do have to shear them to get them. Unlike these two grass types and the fern types, though, when you shear a tall grass, you get a tall grass back. And just like our grass blocks over there or our bushes, we can replicate using bone meal on the taller plant. So it will spread again, and then you can make a big one. And then if you bone meal that one and you have a space to do it with, you will continue to just expand this dry grass, and then you can just harvest them with their shears. Something really cool in the 1.21.6 and onward version is the functionality between this dried dead bush. If you place this dead bush on either of these blocks, you will get a sound effect once in a while. It basically produces a crackling effect. So it like a little windy, dry crackling effect. So if you want to add a dry, crackly effect around your base, if you place them on either one of these two blocks, so any terracotta and any sand block, you're going to get that effect showing up for a sound effect. Right, our next plant life is mycelium, and I don't know if you just noticed that, but little tiny particles get thrown off of this block. It's kind of cool. Doesn't do it a whole lot, but it will spread, just like grass will spread. This will spread if you grow a tree. You'll get more podzol if you grow a very large spruce tree. This will grow onto dirt if there is not anything it's fighting with. If it's not fighting with grass, this mycelium will grow. I consider it a plant, even though it's a block that you have to silk touch, because like all living organisms like mushrooms, mycelium is actually the spawn point of all mushrooms. Like all mushrooms need a mycelium starter kit, basically. So in that case, we have our two mushrooms. These mushrooms, if you plant them around in the podzol or with the mycelium around, they will eventually spread on their own. They are bone mealable, and they become giant mushrooms of different sorts, and then you will need to silk touch to get those mushroom blocks. So they are a plant, sort of. They're a fungus, honestly. They're not really a plant, but the fungus. But you can do the same thing with the red mushroom and the brown mushrooms. Our next block is the moss block. So again, another block that I consider a plant that we haven't gone over yet is moss. You're going to find these in lush caves or in the outcroppings around where lush caves are. Once you get a moss block, which you can also find in some of the sunken ships, they will be in one of the chests in the sunken ship. Once you get one of those blocks, you can actually use bone meal to make a whole lot of them. They will expand onto any natural block. So any like stone, it'll take over deep slate, it'll take over grass, it'll take over dirt, it'll take over podzol. Moss will expand over those areas, so make sure you're very careful when you're expanding the moss that is taking over something you do want, because it can actually take over like andesite and some other natural stones. And you can also get these little moss carpets. And you can also get this block I'm standing on, which are our azalea bushes. So we have the regular azalea bush that has no flowers, and then you have a flowered azalea bush. Also found in the lush caves are these glowberry vines. Glowberry vines will grow always from a solid block. They will not grow like from a leaf block. We'll show you that here in a second. But it has to be some kind of solid block. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be dirt. It could be mushroom. It could be whatever. Like, see, it just can't be a grass block or something along those lines. They will grow as long as they need to, and then occasionally give you a glowberry. You can also speed up the process by bone mealing each individual section. However, you can't bone meal it to make it grow faster. It'll just keep picking the berries and giving you all of these berries. But if you want it to grow faster, you can use the berry to attach a new section to that glowberry bush, and then you could light that one up if you wanted it. One additional thing that you can do with these is you can shear the bottom of these. Now, shearing them will not, like if we grow a new one here, shearing them will not actually give you a berry. You do have to bone meal it and pick the berry to plug it back in. But what we can do with these is we can stop the growth cycle. Now, you can't do that with the vines unless you put a string or some other blocker below where the vine is growing. But with the glowberries, they did institute the function. If you took a pair of shears and right-clicked it, you'll hear a slightly different sound, and it will stop the berry bush from the berry vine from growing from that point forward. See, it has a snip sound, very similar to a sheep snip when you get wool off of a sheep. And then this bush will never grow. Like it will never grow further than that one block right there. Now, another thing that you're going to find within a lush cave, and we will go over another variant of them here in a second, and that is our drip leaf. Now, drip leaves, much like our azalea bushes, you can pluck these with your hand. You do not need a pair of shears. You can just pick them up and they will drop themselves, and you can continue on and plant them wherever you want. Now, you can also shear them if you want to be able to get them too. It's not going to harm them to use it, but you are going to have it drop as many as it has, like however tall it goes. Now, what's cool about these things is that it will plant on a single level, but bone mealing it will make it as tall as you need. And as you can kind of see from the structure here with the wire frame, you can see that there's individual sections. So if I hit this, there's 3 sections, 1, 2, and 3. And if I hit the bottom one, it's going to drop 1, 2, and 3. So you're going to have all 3 sections when I hit it with my hand. You're going to have, just like that, you're going to have 1 drop when you hit the azalea bush as well. Now I'm skipping forward a little bit in time to the pale moss update and the pale garden because of the fact that we have pale moss, and I wanted to show it off alongside of our moss. Now there's something special, as you can kind of see with this wireframe, and I'll show you here in a second. The moss carpets for pale moss is a little bit different. They have a special thing, which I'll show you in a second. And they also have these cool pale hanging mosses, which again, just like a lot of these other plants, can be harvested using shears. And unfortunately, as you saw, it does not harvest without the shears, but you can shear them off and get the pale hanging moss. You can also bone meal them to make them longer. I cannot right click and shear them to stop them from growing, but as far as I can tell, they don't grow too much on their own, but you can stop them like you can with the vines over here. In the right places, these moss blocks, these hanging moss blocks, will actually create a sound effect of a creaking, like a creaky sound effect. If they're hanging from a leaf block from a pale oak tree or an oak tree log, they have a chance of making creaking sounds. So if you want to like add some more atmospheric sounds, you can do that with this block. Something special about the pale moss carpet, unlike the regular moss carpet, is that it gives this little extra growy portion. Now, on a single block, this is as far as it is going to go, but if you have a second block, occasionally when you put down the moss, it will automatically grow that additional section and grow it up 2 blocks. But if you get this effect and you don't want to keep replacing your carpets, you can also bone meal it to get the same effect where it goes up 2 blocks. Our next plant type, we are going to dig into the nether for these two. I've basically been using different blocks that you can bone meal things on, that things will spread on, that things will grow on, that make special sound effects, etc. When the nether updated back in 2020, we got these 2 blocks. We got the Crimson Nylium and the Warped Nylium. These 2 blocks do need to be silk touched with a pickaxe, unlike like a shovel or something along those lines. However, they can be bone mealed, which is pretty cool, and get some plants off of this with the bone meal. And it is an extremely helpful thing if you want to take these blocks into the overworld to be able to grow additional plants and trees and funguses. Basically, you're going to be able to use these blocks if you silk touch them and bring them back. They will spread onto netherrack. So if you have a plain netherrack block next to one of these 2 blocks, and then you bone meal it next to that block, you will get either the green or the red. So if I had a whole bunch of this netherrack all around the green, I could replicate it that way, and then I would have more room to grow these cool nether plants. So let's take a look at the nether plants themselves. We have Crimson Roots, which is this really cool floral thing. Now, they do not have to be planted back on this Nylium blocks or either of the Nylium blocks. They can be planted on other substrates. So they can go on grass, they can go on podzol, they can go on moss. The same way with the mushrooms. So the crimson funguses will do exactly the same thing. And there's a special block that grows from the tops of some of our crimson vines, and that is the weeping vine. They can be grown, they can be found from bone mealing one of these mushrooms and making a giant fungus, a crimson fungus. They will come that way. You can bone meal them. You can also shear them. One thing they can do, similar to the glowberries, is be snipped to stop them from growing down. So if I were to take this little block, I could shear it off if I wanted, or I could right-click it and snip it, and then it'll never grow any further than that one block. Now, these are kind of weird. This is a block, this is an additional tail of it, but it's considered one full portion of vine. So make sure you're watching it when you grow them or you add to them. Like that is 2 sections, even though there's kind of a third one. It hangs down further than the block itself. So just make sure you're watching where you're clipping. The last weird red thing is, of course, our nether wart. And our nether wart can be crafted into a nether wart block, which is basically the tops of these guys when they're a giant fungus, when they're the giant crimson funguses. However, you are only going to find these in a few different places around the nether. These are used for making awkward potions in Minecraft, and you're only going to find them in fortresses and bastions. They're going to be growing in patches in the fortresses, and they will occasionally show up in chests in the fortresses. And there's a growing patch in a couple of the specific bastions. You'll have to look that up, but my friend Amy and Steve reminded me that they are found in a couple places. So usually where piglins are, or where there's any big structure in the nether, they're going to find those guys somewhere. Now, skipping back to the warped nylium, just like with our crimson over here, we do have a few different blocks. Now we have our warped mushrooms, so our warped fungus will grow into the big tree when bone mealed, but you're going to find a couple other interesting things in this area when you find a warped nylium area where you're going to find this warped forest. You're going to find these little nether sprouts. Now, nether sprouts are not bone mealable. You can't bone meal them to make them into warped roots, but you can bone meal them, like bone meal this to get more of them. You just have to probably try for a while. There goes. And what's special about them is they do have to be sheared, but once you shear them in, you can actually use these just about anywhere you can put grass or any of the moss blocks, any of the like the Nylium blocks, any of the podzols, etc. You can put them down, so you can use them in a garden scenario. Now, these guys, however, do not need to be sheared. They can just be picked up, and so can these crimson roots. So those are perfectly safe. Another one you do need to shear to get enough of them is these twisting vines. So I actually put a string over this twisting vine because these twisting vines are similar to bamboo, where they will grow as far as they actually want to grow. They are climbable, which is kind of cool. So they can make a good ladder within a build where you don't want to ladder up against the wall. Same thing with these crimson vines. You can actually climb those. You can actually climb glowberries, and you can climb vines. You can also shear it, so it'll stop it from growing. You can also put blocks and stuff to stop it from growing, but a shearing at the top will stop it. Unlike the crimson vines, as you can kind of see, the wireframe is just a single block, and they can be bone mealed, but just make sure that you are trimming the tops of them. Otherwise, they will want to grow and grow and grow and grow, and they will keep going. Going back into the real world, there's some plants that you are going to find that are also really helpful in builds. Now, not this one, but this has an extra decorative element we're going to look at. But the first one is bamboo. Now, a bamboo shoot looks like this, and I did have to put a string on it. Unlike some of these other vines that we can trim, a bamboo block will not stop growing. They can be bone mealed, and they will keep going very, very, very tall until they find some kind of general stopping point. Like all of these plants have some kind of stop, it's built into this particular block where it is. It'll build to this height. It can be cut down using a sword, is actually the fastest way to cut these down. Or you can use an axe or some other block. You can actually use your hand with these two. It will drop all of these segments. So you have each individual bamboo segment to replant. It is a plant that you can make wood out of, although bamboo wood is its own special block, but a lot of people just use it for a decorative element within their builds, or they use it like for other purposes as well. The next block is the cactus. Now, I put string on top of this cactus again. However, in the wild, you can find cactuses like pretty tall. They will grow all by themselves. Unfortunately, you can't bone meal them, so you do have to let them grow. Cactuses are slow growing things in real life too. They will occasionally sprout a cactus flower, but if you want them to stop growing, you can put string or some other invisible block on top of them. Cactuses are kind of a special beast, though. They do not like being next to one another. So if I try to plant one here, it will not let me plant one there. However, kitty corner or like diagonally, it's fine. It doesn't mind like being next to it. If you plant something next to a cactus block, let's try. If you plant something next to a cactus block, it will break the cactus. That is how much cactuses hate being next to anything else. So if you're making a farm or something like that, you are going to have to plant them either diagonally, or you're going to have to give them a block of space, because these little thorns don't like sharing space. Like, they aren't very big or anything like that. They fit inside of a block, but they do not like neighbors whatsoever. Now, our next unusual plant can be bone mealed, just like we were able to bone meal all of the other bushes. So if you bone meal them next to another bone mealable spot, growable spot, they will replicate. Unlike some of these other bushes where you'll need shears, you can use shears, mind you, but you can also pluck these with your hand. They are a block that is perfectly safe. What's cool about these, though, is they have a couple of uses. One, obviously, they're really pretty and sparkly bushes. Quite honestly, they're really cool. The other one is they can be used to create particles. Now, none of these other, like you saw that with the Nylium, there's a little bit of particle. There's some trees that like do particle leaves falling. There is the spore blossom that does particles falling down. But the firefly bush, which is what this is, the firefly bush will create white particles in complete darkness. So if we were to take this bush and bury it down below and give it complete darkness, you're going to start to see little particles of fireflies. Not a whole lot, but as you can see, you can see them from quite the distance around this bush. And it is not coming from this bush here, but the one underneath the ground in the darkness. Now, what's cool during the nighttime, when now both of these bushes are actually doing their effects, and we get them way higher now that this upper one is actually going, these actually have a sound effect. You hear it? Like a little bug buzzy sound. Our next block that we're going to look at is sugarcane. Sugarcane has a lot of uses, but people can also use them for decoration, and very similar to a cactus, where a cactus will only grow up 3 and then maybe have a cactus flower at the top. Bamboo will also only grow up 3. Now, they can be found taller than that, and you can actually make them grow taller than that as well. If you kind of come up and you plop more sugarcane on them, they will continue to grow as keep as high as you want, but they will never grow higher than that 3, which is very handy for quite a few different farms that we use. Now, sugarcane does have to be planted in very specific scenarios. So it does have to be grown next to a water source block or a water block of some sort. It doesn't have to be a source block. It can be running water. But a lot of people like to use these next to ponds and you're going to find them next to ponds. It looks really good as like a cattail or some other thing like that. And I planted next to them a couple of mangrove roots because I wanted to show you what they look like in other situations. Now, in our tree episode last time, I showed you how to get these mangrove roots. They are droppable. Once you grow a mangrove or you get into a mangrove forest, you can use an axe in order to break them down. You do not need silk touch. They can hold water, which is really pretty cool. They're a waterloggable block and you can see them and they will not spit out the water unless you break them. They can also hold mud. So they can be grown with mud in them, and you can actually pick these up in a mangrove forest too, but you can also craft them and you can use them for different decorative purposes. A lot of people like to use these roots in different ways. What's kind of cool is that even though this root will always grow upward like this, if we take a muddy mangrove root, you can actually place them up and down like this, or you can place them to the side so that they have a different texture along the sides. Now, you can't do that, unfortunately, with the mangrove roots themselves, but the muddy ones you can. So if you want to put extra texture to a build or something, you can use it for that purpose. Our next unusual plant is the glow lichen. The glow lichen gives you a 5 light source. A few of these other blocks also give off light sources, like the brown mushroom will give you a 1. The glowberries give you about a 15 or so. The firefly bush actually does produce a little light too. I think it's a level 2 light source, but don't quote me on that. Look at the wiki or look online to make sure that I'm right about that. But of them all, the glow lichen is really, really handy. It is a flat block. It does not come out very far. As you can see, it's kind of like a 1 pixel block. It does look like it's completely flat against the block. It is only harvestable using shears, but you can grow a bunch of it by bone mealing it, and it will grow to whatever next surface it sees fit to be able to grow. You can make farms of this, which is extremely handy. As I said, you can put it down in water because it is a waterloggable block, and is one of the few of these vine plants and plants in general that if you put water on it, it's just going to waterlog it. It is not going to wipe it from existence. A lot of these plants will get wiped out. They'll either get washed out or they will be wiped out completely. Some of our grass types, for instance, if you put water out, it will just erase them from existence. So thankfully, with our glow lichen, we do not have to worry about this. A lot of people use this not only for decoration because it has a really cool effect to it, but you can also use it on some of our builds to just light up little areas to keep them spawn proof. The next one of our plant types is kind of a little weirder. We're going weird now here for a minute. Is our dried leaves. Now, dried leaves can be placed on just about anything but leaves. You try placing them on a leaf block, you cannot, but they like falling on hard surfaces of any sort. They will always arrange themselves by wherever you're facing. It's going to start in the bottom right-hand corner and move its way all the way around counterclockwise. So depending on where you want a leaf, if you want a leaf, say I want a leaf right here in this square, I'm going to have to face this direction. Very much the same as our wildflowers and our pink petals. So keep that in mind with leaves. Dried leaves can be found in all of the forest biomes, and you can also smelt up regular leaves just like this by shearing off or using silk touch on a leaf block and then putting it into a furnace. You can get this leaf litter, these dried leaves, and they make kind of cool crunchy sound when you walk on them. Next up is a block you don't see a whole lot, and that is our little hanging roots. Hanging roots will be found mostly within a lush cave, but you're only going to find them So we have our rooted dirt, and at the very bottom, when it touches the actual lush cave, you will find these roots growing naturally. Now, in order to get them, you do have to shear them, but what's cool is that you can also use rooted dirt to create more of them. So they are reproducible, and all you need is this rooted dirt. You shear it, and then you would bone meal it again, shear it, bone meal, shear, etc. And you can have as many of these as you want. They can only be grown underneath a block, and just like with some of the others, it does have to be a solid block, so it can't be a leaf block. It has to be some kind of solid block for it to hang off of. Another one of our very weird plants, and I'm going to call this a plant. I did go over this in the garden episode. I did go over this a little bit in the chorus flower episode, but there is a chorus plant. It is called the chorus plant. You cannot actually set a chorus plant down. I mean, you can do that. They don't like to share spaces either. The chorus plant itself in actual regular survival Minecraft is not a placeable block. Like, you cannot do what I just did and grow more just like that in survival Minecraft. They do have to grow. You cannot bone meal these things either. They have to do their own thing. But in creative, you can build with them a little bit, like what I just did there. However, in order to do these chorus plants, and they can grow next to one another, like the actual flowers can grow next to one another, but you will put them down on an endstone block and they will grow randomly. Now, they make a sound effect, which I think is why they call them chorus flowers, because they make a whoom sound when they grow. But they will grow all sorts of weirdness, and then once they are dead, or once they're done growing, they will turn into that. They will have, like, their flower will close. And at that point, you can get these by doing, like, cutting them with an axe or like hitting them with an arrow or something, and they will drop themselves. But if you are not careful and you cut the plant itself, it will not drop this block. So you do have to drop this block first before you cut these out. And once you actually do break these down, they will become a chorus fruit. So each individual block here becomes a chorus fruit. There is a little bit of control. You could put other blocks around to kind of stall out the growth cycle, just like I did here where they stopped each other. This one probably wanted to grow that way into that block, or it wanted to grow somewhere else, and that's why it stopped itself. Very unique plant to try to grow. So if you want to try your hand at these things after you've gone to the end and defeated the dragon, be my guest. I would love to see what you can manage to do with these plants. Now that I've finished all the overworld, the nether, and the end plants, some of the different plants that you can find in caves and in other biomes such as that, let's not forget about water plants. We do have quite a few different plants that we have that can be water logged and actually grow in the water. Now, our first plant type, as I come here in the water, is the seagrass. We have normal seagrass, and if you bone meal the normal seagrass, you get tall seagrass. They can be bone mealed. They can be bone mealed. They can be sheared and cut, and actually you can grab that. Now you cannot grab a too tall. You're just going to shear and get more small grass. This is used for feeding turtles, actually, but you can also plant them anywhere you want. You can also bone meal a hard surface underwater and just get a whole bunch. Like, they're just gonna pop up wherever there's free space within a waterlogged block that has a solid block. If you go into an ocean, you're going to find kelp. Kelp can be cut by hand. You do not need to have bone meal. You don't have to use shears, but you can grow them faster, but they can also be grown by placing another kelp on top of them. And they can be sheared to stop them from growing by right-clicking them. They're one of the few blocks that can do that. So if you wanted to have them only 2 high and you had a 3 or 4 high pond, you can do that. Otherwise, they're all going to grow up to the surface eventually. They love to grow, so just keep that in mind when you plant them. They will not spread on their own, but they will grow up to the top of the surface of the water as much as they can. Seagrass will not do that automatically. You do have to bone meal them to get them tall. Another sea life plant is the sea pickle. You can find these in warm oceans. They can be bone mealed as well, but they must be on a coral block to do so. They can be placed up to 4 in a block. So they come as a single plant, just like this, and then you can make them give off different light levels within their block down here, depending on how many sea pickles you put in that block. So they are stackable. You can also place them on land just the same way, but as you notice, like, there's a little wick basically to the sea pickle, or that's the actual like living organism within the sea pickle underwater, but you do not see that in land or in a dry area, but they are used as a decorative block. You can put them on pumpkins to make them look like a stem. You can put them on different plants to give them kind of a cool like look. Like, you can use sea pickles for all sorts of different things, where you could do candles or whatnot as well. One of our unreproducible plants is the lily pad, and the lily pad are found in mangroves and other swamps. And these fellas right here, like you have to go and search them up. They are breakable using a boat or with your hand or any other tool. They will break. They are placed randomly, which direction they place. You can place weird things underneath them. You can place things hanging from underneath them. Oddly enough, you can actually place a lantern underneath these things, and they will stay in place. Even though a lantern isn't technically a waterloggable block, that is an odd thing that you can do with these things. The only other way you can get these without going anywhere to go find them and harvest them up is to fish them up. They are a fishable block of all of the different things here in this whole row. This is the only one you can actually catch while you're fishing. Now, our last leafy green over here is our small drip leaf. Small drip leaves can only be found within our lush caves, and you do have to shear them to be able to get these blocks. Now, the only other place that you can go to get these is trade with a wandering trader. Wandering trader will occasionally sell you these for emeralds. Now, I would recommend, if you want to have this beautiful little block here, never bone meal it. Don't do it. Don't bone meal it. Never do it. Because you can get plenty of drip leaves by just bone mealing the drip leaves and then breaking them. However, a small drip leaf can be bone mealed and become a regular drip leaf, but you'll never get the small drip leaf shape back. It's always going to be just this big drip leaf all the time. It will never be anything else. So if you have a small drip leaf, use it for decoration. It has to be planted on a natural surface of clay. And they're very subtle, but the look of these are so cool. I would definitely recommend anytime you find a watering trader with one of these and you have extra emeralds, go ahead and buy them. They are not reproducible. You can't bone meal the area in a lush cave to get more of these. You do have to search them very much like a spore blossom. You have to find them spawned in unless you can find a watering trader. All right, we're coming on the last few unusual things that I'm actually going to include in the plant category, even though I guess technically in real life, corals are actually living creatures, not plants. Same thing with sponges, actually, and that's why I included these sponges here. But we do have to treat them very much like a living being when you harvest these. You do need silk touch for all of these blocks. And we have different ranges of colors. So if I come down into the water so you can see them better, we have pink, magenta, red, yellow, and blue. And each of these have their own names. So brain coral, bubble coral, fire coral, horn coral, and tube coral. And they're individual blocks here. We've got the tube coral, horn coral, and then you've got the fans. So each of the fans are a little bit different. So if we were to look at the brain coral, for instance, it has a very nice and fluffy look. The bubble coral is a little bubblier. The fire coral kind of looks a little bit like fire. The horn coral looks like horns, and tube coral tubes, obviously. And the fans are kind of similar. The blue is about the smallest design, more compact. The yellow branches out a little bit more. The red is really leafy and sparse. And some of these, like the bubble corals, a little more rounded and then a little bit more branchy. All of these corals have to be planted in water or adjacent to a water source block in order to continue to have these brilliant colors, because the moment you place them out of the water, and that includes any of these corals, they are going to dry up and become gray. So any of these, you can silk touch them. They will come home with you. If you do not silk touch them, they will either break or they will turn into dead coral, which are placeable on other surfaces. So you can place them within a build to create kind of a dead plant looking thing, or a white bush. I'm sure they would look really good in with the pale moss, etc. But make sure you're very careful that you're putting them in water or adjacent to water if you want them to retain this beautiful color. Our sponge blocks are kind of living, but also not plants. But I had no other place to put these in all of our categories of weird and wild blocks as we're doing these tutorials. So I'm going to add the sponges in right here. We have a dry sponge, and then we have a wet sponge. A wet sponge is a sponge that has soaked up, a dry sponge that has soaked up all the water. I'm not going to do that in this block because it would dry up almost this entire pond, and we don't want to dry up this and kill all the coral. But a dry sponge will dry up large areas of water, which is extremely helpful if you're draining an ocean monument or draining a sunken ship or something along those lines, draining a riverbed. Anywhere there's large bodies of water, you need to clear the water from very quickly. they will go from this to a wet sponge. You will actually find them as wet sponges within an ocean monument. They can be harvested by hand, but it takes a while. The fastest tool to use is a hoe. Much like some of these other plants, you can use like hoes and silk touch, that sort of thing, to be the fastest tool in order to tear them down and take them home. Wet sponges give this little drippy effect because they're wet. If you put them in a furnace or you put them into the nether somewhere, they will dry up almost immediately. It is the most satisfying sound in the game. If you have never tried putting a sponge in the nether, a wet sponge in the nether, you should do that and experience it for yourself. And our very newest block, and I didn't include this with our pale moss and some of our pale moss carpets, etc., is resin. Resin, although technically not a plant, it functions as part of a plant. And what I mean by that is if you cut a tree in real life, if you cut any tree, especially like pine trees, etc., you're going to get like a sap or a resin. And that is going to dry up into an amber looking like blob. And that is what this is. So resin can be used this way. Once you kind of hit a creaking by its oak tree next to its creaking heart, it's going to create this resin. It is farmable by hand, which is really helpful. And it will drop these resin clumps and it will grow all the way around. You can use these resin clumps on other things. You can use them on the ground. You can use them wherever you want to kind of add additional decoration. Any solid block or leaf block in this case, thankfully, you can place these little resin clumps. They are very handy for kind of adding a flowery texture to a leaf block or maybe a pox on like this kind of block, etc. As I said, another one of those blocks that I don't really have a place to put it within the grand scheme of all of our tutorials, but I thought it really needs to fit this with the plants because it really looks good in a place of a plant. So if you have like a flower patch where you want a whole bunch of yellow flowers and red and orangey flowers, you can actually put these little lumps of resin around and give them that cool look. They're a really cool addition after the Pale Garden update, and I highly recommend at least farming these guys if you want to have just a little bit of extra something in your builds to kind of give an additional pop of this orangey yellow reddish color. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching. This concludes the plant series of our tutorial series. However, we're not finished with tutorials. There's so much in Minecraft. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, leave me a comment about what's your favorite plant. And if you haven't had any of these plants or one of these things surprised you and you didn't realize they existed, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. I'd also love to hear about it of what you are doing with these plants. We do have a Discord. I hang out in the Craftworks Discord quite often. That link is below. Feel free to join us and share your builds and let me know where you have used some of these plants and what kinds of decorative things have you used when you use these plants. Thank you very, very much for joining me today. I love you very much. Give yourselves a hug from me, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.